in Niagara. And I'd like to thank the Niagara region and its people for the very warm welcome today. And before we start the day, I would like to acknowledge that we gather here on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, this area is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Le G7 est un groupe de partenaires particulièrement influents. Nous n'avons pas toujours les mêmes opinions, mais nous avons démontré notre capacité à travailler ensemble de manière constructive. Au cœur de nos efforts se trouve un objectif commun, répondre aux attentes de nos citoyens et citoyennes et favoriser la stabilité et la prospérité économique à l'échelle mondiale. Au cours de la présidence canadienne du G7 en 2025, nous avons réaffirmé notre engagement envers l'unité de longue date du G7. Je suis fière d'être ici, aux côtés de mes homologues, pour donner le coup d'envoi à la dernière réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères du G7 de cette année. Cette réunion est particulièrement importante car nos homologues de l'Afrique du Sud, de l'Arabie saoudite, du Brésil, de l'Inde, du Mexique, de la République de Corée et de l'Ukraine se joindront à nous. La contribution de ces partenaires clés sera cruciale pour apporter des perspectives régionales et élaborer des réponses aux défis mondiaux auxquels nous sommes tous confrontés. The next 24 hours will be absolutely jam-packed. Tonight, we will hold a G7 foreign ministers working dinner with global peace and stability at the top of our agenda. In particular, we will have a constructive exchange on critical priorities, including advancing long-term peace and stability in the Middle East, supporting security and building prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, and responding to urgent crises in Haiti and Sudan. Tomorrow, we will start the day with a discussion with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha to reaffirm our collective support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's aggression. We will then be joined by all of our partners for discussions on critical minerals, energy security, and economic resilience. Meeting global challenges requires global partnerships. The issues we are facing transcend the G7 and our borders. And this is why it is absolutely vital that we have diverse geographic representation around the table. So let's get started. Thank you. Merci.
Hi, Minister Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC. In September, you said that the Canadian government had started to receive some collaboration from India on the matter of the investigation into the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Can you tell us what results that collaboration has yielded so far?
Well, I want to start by saying that Canada is a country that respects and upholds the rule of law. And what that means is that persons in positions in the cabinet, in the legislative branch of government, do not play a role in the investigation and administration or pursuit from a judicial process of any case. That's what the rule of law means. And so what we are committing to and doing that with the government of India is that there is a law enforcement dialogue at the highest levels of our governments, including the head of the NSIA in Canada with Indian government law enforcement officials, and that dialogue is continuing and will continue. Furthermore, From a public safety standpoint, the Minister of Public Safety in our government designated the Bishnoi Group as a terrorist entity under the criminal code. Furthermore, we are ensuring that in the bilateral engagement with India, that these rule of law concerns, that these public safety concerns are foremost in the advancement of the relationship. So, for example, if you take a look at the joint statement that India and Canada signed just 4 weeks ago, you will see that the first page of that joint statement covers the very points that I'm making today: the importance of law enforcement, the respect for the rule of law, and the assurance that at all times public safety will be at the forefront of our bilateral dialogue.
And just as a follow-up, what do you hope to accomplish by opening a consulate in Greenland? What specific diplomatic gains are you looking for Canada?
Canada is an Arctic nation. 70% of our coastline, 40% of our landmass is interfacing with the Arctic. We have an Arctic foreign policy. The Arctic foreign policy contemplates greater engagement, not just in Canada's north, but internationally as well. And so when we open a consulate in Greenland, we are expanding Canada's diplomatic footprint in another Arctic region. I've had numerous conversations with other foreign ministers of Arctic countries, and we all agree that now is the time to ensure that our collective will and footprint is placed in Arctic territory. Canada's recent budget, delivered just last week, put down $80 billion in defense spending. We are going to reach 2% this year and 5% of GDP by 2035. Much of that spending is going to involve dual-use infrastructure in the Canadian Arctic: ports, roads, railways. But from a foreign minister's standpoint, my concern is not only on the implementation of those commitments, but also the broader work we can do internationally to ensure that we are collaborating and cooperating with other Arctic nations in support of global peace and security. That's the reason. Thank you.
Ahmed Hazim, Al Jazeera. I have a question about tonight's dinner, the working dinner, about global security and peace. Your remarks earlier said that you are going to discuss the long path forward toward peace, and I'm going to just be specific about the Gaza plan, peace plan. The move toward the second phase of that plan, it seems that it's very complicated rather than what we expected before. And now the aid trucks coming into Gaza is not enough. The international force is not established yet. The discussions with the UN for the UN mandate for this is not going as smooth as we expect. What are you as a group at the G7, and what do you expect to listen from Secretary Europe in this dinner to push this thing forward?
Thank you for the question. And I appreciate the sentiment that you are raising, which is that we want a ceasefire to be long-lasting and to yield the benefits that are outlined in the peace plan. And Canada certainly welcomes the peace plan and President Trump's work to end the war in Gaza. It's crucial. We believe that Hamas must disarm and must have no role in the governance of Palestine. There must be this continued emphasis on a ceasefire and, as you say, the unhindered flow of humanitarian aid. And I will say that Canada has placed almost $400 million in humanitarian aid, much of it with international organizations, some of it remaining on trucks in areas like Jordan. We need that aid to flow. It is contemplated in the peace plan, and humanitarian aid must flow. Gaza must be demilitarized with no displacement of the Palestinian people. So Canada's initial and continued position is that the peace plan must be upheld, and parties around the world should continue to support it. And I've been in touch with many of my counterparts in the Arab countries to ensure that they know that Canada is here to support the implementation of the peace plan through humanitarian aid, through support with electoral reforms, through ensuring that we are offering expertise from a security standpoint. So the bottom line is Canada's continuing to work with international partners around the world to ensure that Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security. The return of hostages is ongoing and needs to continue, and I think we should remember that this is a process and wouldn't be accomplished in 1 week or even 1 month, but that we need to stay with it for the medium to long term as well.
My second question is about Sudan. Sudan is a very vulnerable place right now. The Quartet last week was supposed to issue a statement saying that there is movement toward a peaceful solution, but then Al-Fashir pulled. And now, what are you as a group going to do to push both parties to sit down and maybe end this?
So Canada, I will begin by saying, like many of you in this room and many countries represented here, is absolutely horrified by the attacks in Al-Fashir and condemns the reported mass killing of over 2,000 civilians. And we urge all parties to uphold international law, protect civilians, and allow the unimpeded passage of humanitarian aid immediately. Canada has put on the table humanitarian aid for the people of Sudan, and we have done so since the conflict began. As examples, $64 million in humanitarian assistance, $24.8 million in peace and stabilization assistance, $14.5 million in development assistance that we announced earlier this year. So we are seeking to play a role to further the interests of peace and stability in Sudan, to support those who are suffering and dying needlessly in Sudan. We have an arms embargo on Sudan under both the United Nations Act and the Special Economic Measures Act. This is very important to us in terms of our foreign policy, and part of the conversation that we will have here today is how can we do more collectively? Because what I've mentioned to you thus far is our bilateral work with Sudan. The beauty of the G7 is that it allows multilateralism to do its work. And Canada, as the host of the G7, will be seeking more collective action on Sudan.
That's all the questions for now, Minister. This is going to conclude the press conference for this moment.
Thank you so much.